So carrying on with Emile. It looks like Emile, E-M-I-L-E, but Emile by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So Jean-Jacques Rousseau is this big philosophical thinker. He represents the break from modern education, from the ancient classics, right? The so-called classics, Roman, Greek, and Latin, on and on. So, Emile. Well, I'm not actually ready for the page. Hold on, let's see. The page. Take possession, father, beget, undertaken, theoretical. Seek a tutor. He says he's not smart enough to be a tutor. The poor man has no need of education. The education of his own station in life is forced upon him, and he can have no other. The education received by the rich man from his own station is least fitted for himself and for society. Moreover, a natural education should fit a man for any position. Now that it is reasonable. Follow a young man about for 4 years, another to be his guide for 5 and 20. You can find a tutor for your son when he is already formed. I want one for him before he is born. Your man may change his pupil every 5 years. Okay, here, yeah. I'm finding where I left off. So this is the fourth, right? The fourth film. So Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Emile. Alright, carrying on. So I know that such an undertaking, the author who ranges at will among theoretical systems, utters many fine precepts impossible to practice, and even when he says what is practicable, it remains undone for want of details and examples as to its application. I have therefore decided to take an imaginary pupil to assume on my own part of the age, health, knowledge, and talents required for the work of his education to guide him from birth to manhood. This is Emile, okay? So this is the imaginary pupil. There is no person named Emile. Now, I've heard Rousseau has children that he put into the orphanage, but then I also heard that that was a cover for his masculinity, since he was sort of feminine, which you can tell by his picture. Maybe he was gay and didn't have children. So, where's your children? Oh, I had kids, but I sent them to... It was more honorable to be a deadbeat father who just throws the kids into an orphanage than it was to be a homosexual. So that's plausible. I'm not for sure which one. If he had kids and was a bad father, or if he didn't have kids and it was a lie. So Emile is an imaginary pupil, and we're teaching Emile as a boy. He has a different training for a girl and boy. So he is sexist. He's wrong about the sexism. But carrying on. So basically just this, Emile, use that for women too. What he says for Emile should also apply for girls too. So all children, boys and girls. So he takes imaginary pupil, assume on his own part the age, health, knowledge, and talents required for the work of his education to guide him from birth to manhood when he needs no guide but himself. This method seems to be useful for an author who fears lest he may stray from the practical to the visionary. For as soon as he departs from common practice, he has only to try his method on his pupil. He will soon know, or the reader will know for him, whether he is following the development of the child and the natural growth of the human heart. This is what I've tried to do, lest my book should be unduly bulky. I have been content to state those principles, the truth of which is self-evident. But as to the rules which call for proof, I've applied them to Emile or to others, and I have shown in very great detail how my theories may be put into practice. Such, at least, is my plan. The reader must decide whether I have succeeded. At first, I have said little about Emile, for my earliest maxims of education, though very different from those generally accepted, are so plain that it is hard for a man of sense to refuse to accept them. But as I advance, my scholar, educated after another fashion than yours, is no longer an ordinary child. He needs a special system. Then he appears upon the scene more frequently, and towards the end, I never lose sight of him for a moment until, whatever he may say, he needs me no longer. So, just like riding a bicycle, a good parent, a good father or mother of a child, or any person who's trying to educate the child in the bicycle, you hold, on the bike and you give them all the encouragement, and, eventually they have to let go and go on. But you stick with them until they get on that bike and go. If they haven't got on the bike and go, you haven't taught them shit. So anybody, like people in the classroom stage, on a stage, basically they ride a bicycle, they're doing all these tricks, Right, look at me, I'm doing all these tricks in front of, everybody. Now, you got to go and study that shit yourself. Adios, I don't care if you fail or flunk. Um, that's not a real education. So a real education is to actually see the person through. And he's saying a good father or mother isn't just teaching them how to ride a bike, but how to live life. So you kind of hold them until they are able to succeed and fly out when they are ready. When they are ready and they are strong and they built themselves up and they're physically strong, mentally strong. They are super individuals who have a fundamental understanding of themselves, their dignity, their decency, their humanity. And by knowing their fundamental core self, what's their passions, what guides them, what matters to them, what's important to them. And once the individual figures out for themselves, then you make sure that individual can achieve the things that they want to achieve. You set in a place. You can't choose whether a child wants to be an actor or a doctor. You can try to influence them when they're young. But if you try to influence them to be a doctor and all they want to do is just act, just be on Broadway and go to Hollywood and make it big, then you should put the structure and scaffolding in place so that we can attempt their dreams. And that's a true education. So I pass over the qualities required in a good tutor. I take them for granted. I assume I am endowed with them. As you read this book, you'll see how generous I have been to myself. So he says, okay, I'll only remark that contrary to the received opinion, a child's tutor should be young, as young indeed as a man or may well be who is also wise. Were it possible, he should become a child himself, that he may be the companion of his pupil and win his confidence by sharing his games. Childhood and age have too little in common for the formation of a really firm affection. Children sometimes flatter old men. They never love them. People seek a tutor who has already educated one pupil. This is too much. One man can only educate one pupil. If two were essential to success, what right would he have to undertake the first? With more experience, you may know better what to do, but you're less capable of doing it. Once this task has been well done, you will know too much of its difficulties to attempt it a second time. If ill done, the first attempt augurs badly for the second. It is one thing to follow a young man about for 4 years, another to be his guide for 5 and 20. You find a tutor for your son when he is already formed. I want one for him when he is born. Your man may change his pupil every 5 years. Mine will never have but one pupil. You distinguish between the teacher and the tutor. Another piece of folly. Do you make any distinction between the pupil and the scholar? Is there only one science for children to learn, the duties of man? This science is one, and whatever Xenophon may say of the education of the Persians, it is indivisible. Besides, I prefer to call the man who has this knowledge master rather than teacher, since it is a question of guidance rather than instruction. He must not give precepts, he must let the scholar find them out for himself. If the master is to be so carefully chosen, he may well choose his pupil above all when he proposes to set a pattern for others. This choice cannot depend on the child's genius or character. As I adopt him before he is born, they are only known when my task is finished. If I had my choice, I would take a child of ordinary mind, such as I assume in my pupil. It is ordinary people who have to be educated, and their education alone can serve as a pattern for the education of their fellows. The others find their way alone. The birthplace is not a matter of indifference in the education of man. It is only in temperate climes that he comes to his full growth. The disadvantages of extremes are easily seen. A man is not planted in one place like a tree to stay there the rest of his life and to pass from one extreme to another. You must travel twice as far as he who starts halfway. If the inhabitant of a temperate climate passes in turn through both extremes, his advantage is plain. For although he may be changed as much as he goes from one extreme to the other, he only removes halfway from his natural condition. A Frenchman can live in New Guinea or in Lapland, but a Negro cannot live in Tornia nor a Samoyed in Benin. It seems also as if the brain were less perfectly organized in the two extremes. Neither the Negroes nor the Laps are as wise as Europeans. So Rousseau is a racist and anti-Laps, whatever a Lap is. So if I want my pupil to be a citizen of the world, I shall choose him in the temperate zone in France, for example, rather than elsewhere. So France is the best place to teach a man, not in Negroland in Tornia or by the Samoyed in Benin. Simpsons are on. I'm gonna cut this short, so come back.